From big pharma to big karma. Yeah, I said it. Hello from Denver, Colorado. I spoke at an event called Liberty on the Rocks, which was pretty cool. It's always fun to speak and tell people about the excellent book I put out, which you might have heard of, Big Pharma. Guess it quacks like a duck. Because if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then I guess it's a duck. After that, I went to Third Eye Carnival, featuring Charlie Robinson, the host of Macroaggressions podcast. I was on there not long ago. And Scott Armstrong, host of Rebunked podcast. And I've also done a couple of shows with him. So it was really great to meet these people in person that you've only heard online. I'm going back to the UK tomorrow. So while I'm away, I've been keen not to neglect you, but to leave you with some material that you will enjoy on your podcasting app while I'm away. And this is my first appearance, you heard my second appearance, last week on the Terrain Theory podcast, where I was talking about the book I was writing on the pharmaceutical industry. You can get that book. Hearing some of the content, you might want some more details. So allow this to whet your appetite for my new book. Catch you on the flip side. I'm from the UK, right? So when I went to the USA, I was shocked by how many pharma ads there were on TV. That's not allowed in the UK. And I naively thought that was to sell drugs. But actually it's not. Because listen to the list of side effects that they give after the pharma ad. What they're doing is they're buying favorable coverage. The pharma companies pay more for advertising time than anyone else. And during the evening news, you'll see something like 18 out of 22 ads are pharma ads.
Greetings and love, you beautiful humans. It's Ben Hardy, co-host of the show. This week, Mike and I brought on Antony Sammeroff, a longtime libertarian theorist and author of the book Universal Basic Income, For and Against. Antony came on to talk about his latest book in progress, which takes on Big Pharma. We also got into water fasting, the pseudoscience of psychiatry, and how he used a terrain approach to heal a vaccine injury. Before we dive in, I want to thank you, dear listener, for your continued support of this show. We love hearing from so many of you, and we deeply appreciate the ratings and reviews being left on platforms like Apple Podcasts. If you haven't done so, and you feel moved to leave a review, it really helps us get these conversations out there to more people. We feel blessed and grateful to have this platform and a growing, passionate audience that shares our curiosities and open minds. Thank you. Now on to the show. Welcome back to Terrain Theory. All right, we are live. Antony Sammeroff, welcome to the Terrain Theory podcast.
It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. I know you've got many of the preeminent guests in this space, and I've been enjoying your show. So it's a great pleasure to join you.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Antony, why don't you give the people a little bit of background on who Antony Sammeroff is?
Who am I? Now that's pretty deep. Like, on what level of analysis do you want to go? Usually when you say, I am an emanation of the one consciousness that is all things, seeing the world subjectively through the vocal viewpoint of Antony Sammeroff. That's probably not what you were going for. Getting a little bit Alan Watts on you already. But yeah, I'm from Scotland, as you may be able to hear from my accent. I am a counsellor, a psychotherapist, and for a long time, a libertarian theorist. I've always been into writing, so whatever I learned about, I tended to write about. And when I was in college, I got a gig as a theatre critic, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me as a writer, because I reviewed about 150 theatre productions, plays, musicals, operas. It's the fucking interpreted that. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to curse. We do it a
Yeah, go
lot in
for it.
Scotland.
We
Whatever.
do it a lot
Uh,
on this podcast. Yeah, you're good.
Oh, right, okay, good.
Yeah,
Well then,
yeah.
fuck shit from this asshole.
There we go.
Right.
I know at least two or three listeners who have just walked away from the podcast, and that's fine.
Well,
Keep going, keep
well,
going. They know who they are.
we've not even got to the good shit yet. Oh God, I did it again.
On chain, stick with us. Go
I know,
ahead.
it's okay. Sorry to interrupt. You're a theater critic. Yeah, get in.
Yeah, so I got into so that gave me a chatty style. So when I got into writing about intellectual topics, I just basically started writing about economics and stuff like that, just like I was writing a theatre review. And no one, like, don't get me wrong, economists aren't exactly known for their chatty, accessible style. So
Mm.
people liked it, so I kept on doing it. I wrote a book called Universal Basic Income For and Against, and I was writing a bunch of stuff but not finishing anything, and including on the economics of healthcare. And then COVID happened, or apparently happened, uh, and then I started writing this book, and which is on Big Pharma. And I was able to also, I ghost wrote a book for a naturopath, which taught me tons of stuff. So having that background, like, I felt like, at the risk of sounding conceited, I felt like I was uniquely positioned to write this book. No one could write it but me, because I've got the economics angle, I've got the natural health angle, I've also gone through my own health challenges, which I reversed to a large degree through terrain approaches, and no, I could give a panoramic view. And as soon as I started writing, I knew that this was the most important thing I could possibly be doing with my life. And so I've been pursuing that full force. And the good news is you can get a bunch of excerpts from the book already if you go to 7pharmamyths.com, the number
Mm.
7, pharma like P, harm, A, and myths like Greek mythology, .com, and you can download a short ebook, which I think is pretty fucking good, I'm not gonna lie. Um, and read that, and then that's just to whet your appetite for the big book that's going to be coming out whenever I finish it. So that's my long-winded biography. I hope you enjoyed it.
Anthony, tell us a little bit then about what you are, what you are discovering and how you're going to lay out this book.
Oh, that's such a good question. Each chapter is going to take it from, right, a lot of the time when I was researching this, I would find some like totally shocking information on like page 157 of a book or something like that. And I was like, wait, what? The AMA admit that of the 30 years of extension of life that we've had, 25 are attributable to public health things, and only 5 are attributable to medicine, and 3.5 of that is preventative care, not pharmaceuticals. Wait, what? So I took all of that stuff and put it in the first chapter of the book. So the first chapter of the book blows the idea that we're living longer, healthier lives due to pharmaceutical medicine out the water. I think the second chapter is called An Ounce of Prevention Actually Isn't Worth a Pound of Cure, which is about how the sicker you get, the more money they make. Then it's like, it goes through all this stuff. So there's one called Pay No Attention to the Man Behind the Curtain, which is about how all the money flows, how pharma funds not, the how pharma money is behind journals, is behind AMA and CDC, everything is behind. Like a great example is like I'm from the UK, right? So when I went to the USA to live with a girlfriend, um, I was shocked by how many pharma ads there were on TV. That's not allowed in the UK. And I naively thought that was to sell drugs. But actually, it's not. Because, I mean, listen to the list of side effects that they give after the pharma ad. What they're doing is they're buying favorable coverage. The pharma companies pay more for advertising time than anyone else. And during the evening news, you'll see something like 18 out of 22 ads are pharma ads. Now, given that there's 1,000 drug withdrawals or more than that, significantly more a year, right? Wrong dosage, wasn't what it said in the bottle, blah, 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 right? They have to withdraw drugs. There could be a pharma scandal on the news every night of the week if the pharma companies chose to cover it, but they don't. So it's not what you think. So everything, continuing medical education, the colleges, everything. So that's pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Then there's one. I'm going to have to break it into 2 chapters now, but it was originally. I'm gonna call one "Trust the Science" on bad science and medicine. It was going to be in the same chapter as me going through the history of medicines that were there that were widely accepted that got withdrawn, and they were going to go in the same chapter. But the thing is, I just keep on discovering so much bad science in medicine that if it goes on the way it goes, it will fill the whole book, you know? So there's so much bad science in medicine. So I guess there's going to be like the bad science of Christmas past and the bad science of Christmas present. And then we'll hopefully go on to the good science of Christmas future. But we pray. It's going to need divine intervention at this point because the CDC just added the mRNA vaccine to the children's schedule. So I don't need to continue. There's a chapter called "Healthcare Doesn't Cost an Arm and a Leg" about doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg, about how we spend way too much on healthcare compared to outcomes and how we could get cheaper healthcare. Everything. That's why it's such a mammoth project, because I'm tackling it from every angle. So that's maybe half the chapters, and it gives you a kind of idea of how the final book's going to go. But you don't have to wait for the final book, because you can open your browser right now and type in 7pharmamyths.com and get a real taster to whet your appetite.
And does the final book have a title yet?
Dude, I'm going to call it Big Pharma. You can't get a better title than that, huh?
Done and done. Yeah.
I was going to I was going to call the subtitle is going to be, unless I change my mind, "None Dare Call It Quackery." And the reason, it's from a quote by John Harlington, whoever the hell that was, where he said, "Treason doth never prosper. What is the reason? Why, for if it prosper, none dare call it treason." The point being, if you take over the government, it's not treason because you're the government. In the same way, Pharma's taken it over. So nothing they do is quackery. It doesn't fucking matter if their own journal says chemo has a 3% success rate and they mix slow-growing cancers into the statistics to make it look like more people live longer even though they don't, or they detect the cancer earlier. So if you detect the cancer 3 months earlier, it looks like people lived 3 months longer, but they don't really. They still don't call it quackery because it's mainstream. But if it's alternative, it's also already automatically quackery. So none dare call it quackery. but it fucking is. It is. I'm telling you. So yeah, so that's and yeah, the answer to that question.
Anthony, what struck me earlier as you were introducing yourself, it seems to me that you found, well, you've said it, that you found your purpose in life, and your purpose
Hmm.
in life is to do this, is write this book and essentially expose big pharma for what they are. And to me, that's a big deal. When we meet someone who has discovered their purpose and is putting all their time and energy that they have in this life towards something, that's profound and compelling. What I want to know is, what were those moments, those specific moments that made you decide, this is it, I have to take on big pharma? Were they discoveries? You mentioned healing yourself outside of the allopathic model. Like, what were those moments that made you go, this is it, this is who I have to take on?
Well, I prior to this crisis, the crisis is not the coronavirus. The crisis is people's psychosis over the whole thing and compliance. I was like into, I don't know, I was writing about economics and I was hopeful that, open-minded people would read it and change their minds because everything was driven by a humanitarian outlook. And everything I wrote has always been driven by um, the desire to reduce unnecessary suffering. And a lot of what I might have written, first of all, I realized that people don't change their mind when you expose them to new evidence, Um, I was listening to some of Tom Cowan's books, who you've had on the podcast, and he talks about the fourth cause of disease being delusional, and he talks about people who, a doctor who um, he thought had a pretty good chance of responding to a detoxification program to save his life from cancer. But he said he didn't want to know because he'd been practicing medicine his whole life, and he just would rather die than be proven wrong. And people would rather injure themselves. So everything, so much of what I would have liked to write before seems futile. Um, Not only that, but there's lots of there, there's lots of stuff I'd like to write about theory, and I would only be writing to other people who share my views. And if I didn't feel like we were in a crisis, I'd pursue those avenues just because they're interesting. And there's nothing wrong with writing about stuff just because it's interesting. In fact, I'm finding writing this pharma book absolutely fascinating. There's tons of things that I've learned that are not even going to make it into the book, otherwise it'll be 200,000 pages. But it's so interesting to learn about. The more I learn, the more interesting it is. But I just feel like it's too urgent. So the good thing about this book is it circumvents the idea of, the intention of this book is to change people's minds. You know, I'm not the asshole whisperer. I don't, I don't need to work really hard to make people believe, to free people of their delusions. The book is for people who really want to know the truth and want to make better decisions in their life. It doesn't rely on systemic change. If enough people read it and understand it, it will lead to systemic change and we'll get a better healthcare system. But as but but the main thing is it will help people and they don't need to get their neighbors to agree with them for it to help them. If they take it, if they get the benefit from it, then their neighbors will see that they've got the benefit from it and it will spread that way. So I think that explains why I feel like this is the thing to do. It's like direct impact on the reader.
Yeah, you mentioned the word quackery, and I
Mhm.
wonder if you could enlighten the listener as to the origins of that word
Oh, did you read
quackery.
that in the ebook?
I may have.
Yeah. So it is said. Well, I mean, it's a fact. In the old days, the doctors used to treat everything with arsenic and mercury, and this would give people conditions like Bell's palsy and other nerve. Abraham Lincoln threw fits famously because of the mercury that the doctors were giving him, and so in a southern accent, the Quicksilver Doctor became the Quack Doctor, and it wasn't a pejorative. They were just Quicksilver Doctors, Quack Doctors. And I don't know, at some point, well, I mean, obviously those treatments didn't work. They made people sick. They may have repressed symptoms in some patients, but similarly, how many treatments are they giving just now that have dreadful side effects that are not being blamed on the medication? The answer is tons, because some people are on like 7 medications. Lots of people are. And have there been double-blind studies on the interactions of 7 different medications? Of course they're not. They're just rolling 7 dices, or rather, um, rolling the barrel on 7 different revolvers, right? So, and with one bullet in each chamber. So it's like, I don't know. Take Angelina Jolie had both of her breast removed preventatively in case she got cancer. And the interesting thing is the gene that supposedly might give her cancer actually helps repair genes, and as long as it's, yeah, I can't actually remember the correct. I don't like to make statements I can't substantiate. I can't remember the details of that gene thing. It'll be in the book. Um, but here's the thing: they rarely cut off women's breasts anymore for cancer, or at least they shouldn't, because they found that just removing the lump is is no is just as effective, more effective, without the intrusiveness. I mean, how many people are they butchering? So I had another point to make on that. Also, as you know, the tumor isn't the cancer. Cancer is a system-wide process. That's why you can remove the tumor, and sometimes it's necessary. If you've got a tumor that's impacting on your ability to go to the loo, then you need to remove it so that you can take a dump, right? So sometimes that's necessary. However, one of my teachers, Gary Tunsky, used to tell his patients, go to the mainstream doctor who says they're going to cut out your tumor and say, well, okay, doctor, I'm glad that you can get rid of my tumor, but what are you going to do about my cancer? you know, so it's like, but here's the thing: the incentive structure of the system is such. Do they get punished for causing side effects? No, they get more money because you'll come in for a treatment for the side effects. I was told by one person who used to practice medicine and quit and fled to Panama that up until sometime in the 80s, the philosophy in mainstream medicine used to be, you don't treat a side effect with another drug, because obviously that's playing whack-a-mole. You either reduce the dosage or you take the patient off the drug completely. But now the philosophy is, you can give a patient a drug with severe side effects just so long as you've got a treatment for the side effect. So this is just a cascade of poisons.
I was I was checking out a stand-up comedian, Taylor Tomlinson. This was on a recommendation from someone close to me, and she, as part of her bit, talks about her issues with mental health, particularly like depression. She's been through a lot of hardship in her life, and so this is part of her bit. I think part of this movement too of normalizing mental health issues, which I think is important for us to be open to. And she talks about going to professionals for her issues and the various medications that they would prescribe to her, and they would tinker with the combination of drugs until they hit on a combination, thinking that they were treating depression, but just tweaking and tinkering and introducing new ones and new combinations, and then hitting a combination that seemed to address her mental health symptoms, and then saying to her, well, actually, this combination is what we use for people with bipolar, so you must be bipolar. So not even starting with the diagnosis, but the diagnosis comes after they come upon a combination of drugs that works. And that blew me away. Number one, that she's just one of how many people are in the system, and this is their same experience. And then two, the normalizing of this is how I treat my mental health is through a combination of incredibly zany, ass backward approach to it. How many others are in this situation and then think that moving forward, this is it. I've found my solution. I've been given this solution. And now to come off of this at any time, I risk going back to, what I was facing before, rather than addressing root cause. And to anyone out there facing mental health, I don't mean to be insensitive, but I'm trying to grapple with what we know are the side effects of all these drugs. And then two, the insanity of approaching a diagnosis sort of from the reverse.
Yeah, of all of the areas where drugs are used, like psychiatry is the most flagrantly pseudoscientific of them all. All of its premises are just that. I mean, there's cases where you can read the book Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whittaker, for example. If you can get him on the show, it would be quite a coup. Like, he would be a great guest because he's really good on psychiatry, and it's like he says in some of the clinical trials for antipsychotics, what they did was they took a group of people who were already performing reasonably well on the drug, took them off the drug, and then randomized half of them into a placebo group and the other half put back on the drug. And they said, well, they do better on the group on the drug did better than the group off the drug. You mean the one that was withdrawing from the drug? What a shocking surprise that must come as, right? That's how bad the science is in psychiatry. Antipsychotics knock people out, right? And that's all. So maybe your life is so horrible that you feel better when you're knocked out than when you're compos mentis. SSRIs numb people out. It's basically a gamble whether you feel better on a psychiatric drug or not. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. They'll try you on another one. And also, here's the thing. People's moods go up and down and up and down and up and down. So they go on the drugs when they feel at their lowest, and then maybe they go back to average at some point, and they think, oh, it must have been the drug. It's called regression to the mean, right? So these sorry, you got me swearing, right? See if I get off on a polite foot in an interview, I stay pretty polite the whole time. But if I start swearing, I just don't stop. So
We're not stopping you.
Yeah, Anthony, you do
Yeah,
you.
I get really angry about psychiatrists because they're on these inflated salaries, for basically harming people, six figures, maybe twice six figures, I don't know. And I'm in Mexico living on a pittance. Who's gonna pay me to go to continuing who's gonna pay me 4 or 5 figures to go speak at continuing medical education and give them a medical education? So, but not just that, not just sour grapes over the money, although it's annoying because that's wealth being leaked out of society that could actually be paying someone to do something useful and help people. As a therapist, I've had lots of clients come to me that have been mistreated by mental health professionals in the past. And I've had, yeah, the complaints, yeah, of people who've had bad therapists are one thing, but worst, the worst, the worst are psychiatrists. Condescending, dismissive, arrogant, not listening, acting like they know them better than they know themselves, not taking any time with them, just trying to fob them off on drugs. The worst case, I don't know if this happened in the 90s or something, but my client phoned their told the psychiatrist that their partner was physically abusing them, and the psychiatrist picked up the phone and phoned up her partner to check out if the story was true or not. So, I mean, I think if you're going to be in the field of mental health, you should at least have to do a counseling course, especially to be at least to be certified by the authorities. They have got no counseling skills. Like, what the hell? It's such a clown world we live in. So yeah, I mean, the stuff on psychiatry is really bad, really, really, really bad. As I said, it's a gamble whether you feel better. Even if you do feel better in the short term, and the long term outcomes don't look good. And Peter Gutschke, however you pronounce, sorry Peter if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, formerly of the Cochrane collaboration, who produced the best studies in medicine, more or less, um, that showed that in the long term, people do worse than if they'd never taken the drugs in the first place, and that they're horrendous to come off. They're so hard to come off. And I didn't know this myself as a counselor until I got into this stuff, and it made me look at my clients that are on them differently. I didn't realize the importance of weaning off them if you've been on them for a long time and whatnot. It's like it's really scary, the road we've come down, you know? And sometimes I wonder how we're going to get out of it. But the first thing is protect yourself, get yourself healthy, and then you'll be able to help the people around you, because we've got a limited amount of power outside of ourselves at this juncture, you know?
Anthony, as you with that background in therapy and mental health, when you step back and look at the state of the world, look at what appears to me anyway to be an increase in the number of people who have or claim mental health issues, the normalization around the conversations about it certainly would lend themselves to feeling like more people have mental health issues. What do you see as like the root cause to this apparent increase in folks having and dealing with mental health issues?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can put it down to one cause, but um,
Causes, perhaps.
yeah, I mean, it's multifactorial, isn't it? Obviously, we're consuming so many more synthetic chemicals than we've ever been in the past, and that is messing with our biochemistry, I think. There's the stuff they're spraying on our food. which is cytotoxic and also messes with your microbiome. And now there's all the stuff linking the gut to the brain. Um, Sociological factors, um, people don't know their neighbors, people are not in a community. I love online, but everything's moved online. Places used to have a scene. The West End of Glasgow, for example, where I grew up in the south side, but it was so exciting to go to the West End when I was a kid. And when I finally moved there, I was like, oh, I've come. It had a scene before online. But if you're into manga or whatever you're into, you find a Facebook group and everything's online. So people don't require an offline scene. And I think online should be a vehicle for creating offline meetups. So the sociological factors, I don't know if all the screen time people are getting is, you know, the way people hold their body, um, arching over, when your chest's open, you breathe deeply. People's shoulders are coming too far forward. Parenting, not enough contact time with mum and dad in the early formative years of life. People aren't breastfeeding for long enough. Where do you start? It's like children need time, especially in the formative years, and lots of touch, and everything's being farmed out. Mum's working, dad's working. It's like we've forgotten to center the world around life. The individual comes first. What would help the individual flourish? And if we started with that principle, then we can enjoy all of these things. You know, Laptops, social media. Um, I mean, your phone's a miracle. It's a supercomputer, right? It's amazing that anyone invented it. Who can say it's a bad thing? But now you've got that sort addiction to instant gratification. Oh, who did someone like? Oh, only 17 people liked my Instagram picture. Oh, why does my Twitter post get so few likes? It's like hilarious. So I think it's multifactorial. I mean, um, so we've got our work cut out for us to change it.
A lot of threads to pick up on. Thank you for essentially holding court. It's really nice to get to know you and what you think.
Oh, thanks.
Just
Well,
yeah.
I'm also
Ju-
interested to hear from you guys if you have anything to add.
Well, I was just going to chime in because I've been studying with Tom Cowan quite a bit the last couple of years, and he he's really what he calls the new biology. I mean, he's questioning how biology or how our understanding of biology works from the ground up, even going so far as to just to wonder if the receptors that modern medicine claims exist
Right.
that these
Interesting.
antipsychotics work on, if those receptors are even real.
Okay.
Um, and so that's sort of fascinating. And maybe this is a good way to pivot into your work on voluntarism and libertarianism. But as you were saying, your critique of psychology and psychologists, and maybe they lack the training, and that the authorities should be watching this. Well, do we really even need to be deferring to authorities at all? I think
Mhm.
we've gotten very complacent as a culture, constantly deferring to authorities. And I'd love to
Right.
hear your thoughts on what what sovereignty means to you and taking ownership, because it is all interrelated as it relates to health, but also lifestyle, for lack of a better term, like how we live our lives seems to be one endless cycle of outsourcing and deferring to authorities. So how do we start to take back that power?
Right. I mean, that is a critical question right now because it seems to me that most people don't want us to take back that power. They're deferring to the authorities. When I was on the left, and
up until my early 20s, you know, I I the left was all about F the wars, like get rid of the Patriot Act, the surveillance state is a bad thing, and the equivalent policies in the UK. Um, and also, rich people exploiting poor people, and those were like the important things. Basically, a lot of it was fuck the government, and now it seems to be like they love the government, and everything the government says is true. So I don't like. How do we shrink the state? I mean, I would trade the problems that I was worrying about in 2019 for the problems I'm worrying about now in a second. Like, it was like, oh no, the left are economically illiterate and they're going to drive the whole society off a cliff of debt because they think you can spend all this money now and not have consequences in the future. And they're implementing all these policies that are meant to help poor people, but they actually harm poor people, and they destroy jobs. And like, I'd happily rather worry about this than, someone's going to force me to take a poisonous injection. More worried about the kids because they don't have any choice. Adults, to some degree, submitted to taking the injection. I'm sorry if you were threatened with your job, but if enough people said this is ridiculous, there's lots of people who disagree with that. They're like, they got the COVID jab and they're happy to do it themselves. But if you ask them, they said, "Yeah, I think they took it a bit too far when they threatened people to lose their jobs." Lots of people think that. The problem is they don't say it out loud. So fuck them. Like, if you're not willing to take a moral stance on a critical issue, then you're part of the problem. So if all of those people said, "Wait a minute, this is not fair," even if they themselves took the jab, then then maybe we'd be doing okay. So I used to think people would think, you have your way of life and that's good, and I have my way of life and that's good, and that's fine. You do your own thing, I'll do mine. The really scary thing is about this, they made a virtue out of live and let die, instead of live and let live. So how do we take back our sovereignty? Start with what you put in your mouth, I guess. Get out in the sunshine, do some yoga, get nice and strong, fit, healthy, breathe clean air, and um, find your sense of purpose in life and do it. I'm not scared really of. People say if you're going to write this book, you should get private security. Someone else said, Judy Mikovits said in her book, I was told not to go to lawless countries like Mexico or India because they are two places that I love. I've spent over 7 months in India, and maybe I'm coming up to the same amount in Mexico in total. Like, uh, because they'll just take you out. Like, if they want to take me out, they'll take. I don't care. Like, I know what I'm doing when I get up in the morning. Get good social skills, get good friends. I may be short, but I'm not short on friends, and that's a great blessing. I've got I've got great people in my life. Make your life amazing and spread the love. I mean, what else can we do at this point? Learn things that are useful and then teach them to other people who are willing to learn them. I'm so not handy, for example. I couldn't fix your plumbing or make a picture frame or anything like that. But before the fake pandemic, I started a woodwork class because I thought, okay, I don't need to be good at this. But see if someone says, "Hey Anthony, do you want to come and help lay down the floor in my apartment?" Which someone did once, by the way. I'll be like, yeah. I don't want to be intimidated by it. At this juncture in history, you need to be a Swiss Army knife. You need to be skillful. so you can be useful to your fellow man. And it's great getting all this intellectual knowledge. I know about tons of stuff because I'm a nerd, but I realized the one thing that the education system really took out of us was they, here's the thing, like, if you're a mechanic, you've got to be practical. Like, if something doesn't work, it won't frickin' work. When it comes to ideas, you can have stupid ideas about economics, political science, history. When's it ever tested, right? So they disconnect people from the physical world by making the entire education subject bound rather than object bound. So what you need to do is learn anything practical. Go to a salsa class, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Something that engages your body, and you can either do right or wrong. Like, I really recommend people do that. In ancient Greece, they called the school a gymnasium. And philosophers, what's your perception of a philosopher now? Some guy in a tweed jacket with glasses, smoking rolled up cigarettes outside the philosophy department, speaking to his postgrad students. And that's great. But I'll tell you something. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle went to the fucking gymnasium. They were buff, right? They took care of their physical body because they knew if they were strong and fit, they could think better. So, yeah, start with the objective, and the subjective stuff's great as well, but everything's a balance, and we're like way too balanced to being thinky. Learn to breathe properly because it'll help you manage stress.
You're you mentioned before we started recording that you're on day 13 of a water fast as you take a sip from your big red mug.
Right. Thanks.
And you want to talk about that at all? How that experience is going for you? And
Oh
one thing
wow.
that we've come the term crystal clarity comes up a lot when Ben and I have
Hmm.
discussed this with past guests. And are you just tell us about that?
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, this is the most profound one so far. I'm not new to it. I've done 21 days twice before.
On your own?
Uh, no, I did them in Tanglewood. I was listening to you
Yep.
with
Yep.
with Lauren Lockman, but this one, me and some friends got a house and we're co-supervising. One's a
Yep.
doctor, and most of us have been 6 out of 7 of the guests that have been here so far have been to Tanglewood. Someone's coming tomorrow for a shorter fast. They've been to Tanglewood. Yeah, and that's the whole bunch. So this one's the most profound one. Um, I definitely got crystal clarity. I had so much energy in the last 7 days, and I've had the miracle of like exploring my body. I've been exploring my body.
You're so new age.
And new ways. Like, obviously I'm not doing crazy yoga poses. I'm not like good at yoga because I've got like injuries that will stop me from ever being good at it. I can't straighten my arms above my head. I have a bunch of injuries, but learning yoga's helped me to accept my limitations and try and improve anyway. So even though I've got these injuries and stuff, it's a bit embarrassing when you've spent 6 months on yoga retreats and someone comes in for the first time and is more flexible than you. But you learn to live with it. He's never done yoga before. So because I'm not doing anything strenuous, just like the smallest movements and stretches into my neck and like holding a tiny stretch for like a couple of minutes until that part of my body relaxes. And now I've kind of been moving into the shoulders and places in my back. And I just really feel like I never would have done this if I hadn't done this fast, which teaches me that, makes me so sure that this is a process that goes deeper each time you do it. uh, this was really the psychological and spiritual, if you like, emotional benefits of fasting really became obvious this time. I think because I'm all about like my main reasons are like healing my gut and stuff like that, and just general organ repair and detox, of course. Like I didn't have as bad detox symptoms as anyone. Not that most people had bad ones, a couple of people did. I had the least, but I know I'm detoxing because I'm so thirsty. I've been
Hmm.
like drinking so much water. So I know I'm trying to get rid of stuff. But yeah, clarity of mind, like you said, I've thought up new approaches to problems I hadn't thought before, got more enthusiastic. But it's also made me realize how really sluggish, when you get to those stages in life where you're just kind of like dragging yourself along, doing the things you need to do. And I was driving myself so hard with the book because the ebook that you can get for free or make a contribution at 7pharmamyths.com. I'm writing an expanded edition for paperback, maybe 100 words, and I thought it would be quick, but it was just taking so long. So the longer it took, the more I was like trying to force it and work for hours, like just go to a cafe and sit down and write, and like not doing exercise, not doing yoga because I just need to get it finished, right? And that was putting me in I guess I had a lot of inertia. The amount of energy and the good moods that were coming up in the first week made me realize if I ever get in that state of mind again, I could just maybe fast 5, 6, 7 days, even while working. It was. I'm not saying it's going to be like this for everyone, but it was pretty much a breeze. I started slowing down on day 9, 10. Get way slowed down yesterday, day 12, and that's kind of, I don't know because I've not done anything strenuous, but continued today. So I might stop soon because I don't want to take a long recovery time for this one. I brought a little bit less weight this time than I thought I was carrying, and it makes a lot of difference because my first fast I was the lightest. My first 21 days fast I was the lightest, and really I should have stopped on day 19 in my opinion, not 21, because I was just each day I stayed on just extended the amount of time it took to recover by more than a day. But I
Hmm.
didn't know that at the time. I didn't know about fasting as well. Whereas the second time I was like 12 pounds heavier, um, and 21 days was a breeze. I could have gone for a couple more days if I had time. Uh, this time I was somewhere in the middle, but closer to the first one, whereas I thought it'd be closer to the second weight. And because I just want to write this book and keep going, I'm probably gonna start refeeding soon. I'm not doing 21. That's for sure. So, but it's been good though. I don't know if that's more details than you wanted.
No, that's good. It's interesting that I wrestle with that. I haven't been able to strike that. I think Ben is probably better at this because Ben, you work a lot of hours a week, but you have worked in time to step away from your computer to go outside to like break up the day. Whereas I've been living more of a quote unquote bipolar existence where it's like I
Mm,
am just straight up naked in the sun gardening, or I'm locked to my computer cranking out emails and booking gigs or whatever, and I
mm,
haven't figured out what that. But I like that you're able to see your tendencies coming and say, okay, I'm starting to get a little manic or trained to my
mm,
device. I'm going to launch into a water fast to break up the cycle, and I think that's an interesting tool that I never considered using.
mm. Yeah, I mean it's totally new teaching for me. I've not put it into practice yet, but I just really felt so rejuvenated. And a water fast really is a rest. 50% of our energy goes to digestion. So you're literally giving the body a rest, a deeper level. So the problem is for most people, of course, they're so toxic that that they don't feel like it's a rest because they're detoxing real fast. But the truth is, most times, and it's not always true. If you can get to day 3, it becomes so much easier. You get the massive detox the first couple of days. Day 3, you stop being hungry, and you won't be hungry for the rest of the week or 8 days or whatever you decide to do, 4 days, 5 days, because your digestive system's just off. You might psychologically like the idea of eating, but you just don't get hungry. So a 1 day water fast is good, better than not doing it at all. But I always caution people there's a risk, because see if you do a 1 day water fast and you're like, oh, it was so hard, you'll think doing a longer one is really, really hard. But actually, it usually gets easier. So yeah, it's like people just need to be advised.
I I certainly found that by similar to what you experienced by day 3, it did get easier. And I found too, by day 3, there was a incredible sense of accomplishment. I mean, it's longer than I had ever gone in my life without eating. And then came the curiosity, and almost the like competitive sense with myself. Okay, how far can I take this? Because if I can
Awesome.
go to 3, then what's the limit here? And I only ended up doing 8 because I did
Hey,
it.
that's great.
It really was, Antony, and I am eyeing another one in the very near future. At least 8, perhaps longer. The 21, it sounds like it is best done when supervised or in a group setting, or perhaps on a retreat.
It's interesting that you said 8, because in yoga they say you can do up to 8 days without any risk of damage to the system. So
Hmm.
that's the number of days that they say.
Yeah, I did
So
it.
it's an auspicious number.
I did not know that. I think it maybe just happened, or there was some intuition there that I wasn't aware of.
Mm.
Good to know. And so you're thinking of ending on 18, 19, is that right?
No, 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 no. I'm 2 weeks.
Oh,
This
2 weeks.
is gonna be 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's mostly because I want to get back to work, so I
Yeah.
don't want a long recovery time. And also, I've got so much out of this already that I don't feel like so I'm just going to refeed on fruit for for a few days, and that's going to be awesome. Yeah, I always enjoy that. But then I'll be looking forward to something a little bit more adventurous.
Antony, you mentioned earlier on in our conversation that you had your own journey, health journey, overcoming some challenges, and you mentioned that you use some notions around terrain to do that.
Mhm.
And I wondered if you could share a little bit more about some of those health challenges you faced.
Sure. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I was vaccine injured. I've got things associated with that. I had all the food allergies and the um just mostly wheat and dairy, but I didn't know that I had them. So I was eating all this stuff when I grew up. My I was eating everything, and so that probably made things worse and worse as I got older. And you need to roll back all that damage. Um, I have. Yeah, and then when I went to school, we have this injection. I don't know what you call it in the USA. In the UK, they call it the BCG, which was a 3-in-1, but it's not the same as MMR. Anyway, before they gave it to us, they tested us. I was dreading getting this injection anyway, and I came up with a big blotch, right? And they were like, oh, well, I mean, that means either you're allergic to it or you're immune. So they didn't give me it. And I was like, phew. Now, as an adult looking back, I'm like, well, if I was allergic to that one, how many other things did they inject me with that I didn't know I was, that they didn't test me for, that I was also allergic to? So I had eczema. Once it got so bad, I got impetigo. By the way, I'm totally eczema free now, so the terrain stuff totally worked. And I got all other skin stuff like blotches on my um. I'll tell you like bad doctor stories. I got blotches on my chest, and the doctor gave me something topical. As you know, all their medications just treat symptoms; they don't treat the root cause. It went away, and then obviously when I finished, it came back. And I went back to the doctor and said, this is, one of the many times that made me think doctors don't know shit from a very young age. I was like, why did it come back? And he shrugged and he was like, um, poor luck. And then he paused and he went, poor care. As though it's my fault, poor care. I was like, what? I wish I'd been like, what exactly do you mean by that, doctor? Like, in what way did I take poor care? Because I'd like to correct that. What the hell does that mean?
Mm.
Right? So I liked that doctor when I was a kid, but later on when I grew up, and on reflection, he was kind of an asshole. Like another time, yeah, I suffered from depression and anxiety. I think that was all related to everything else because as the body's got more healthy, I don't feel anxious and depressed. I'm still working on levels of anxiety actually that through breathing exercises and everything. But now it's like more of a learning experience. It's not like it was before. Um, um, so yeah, I went and he was going to put me on an antidepressant. I was like, okay, but I'd have to do some research first. And he went, okay, doctor. And I was actually shocked. I thought he'd be happy that I was taking an active interest, but actually, he was a patronizing asshole. He was like, okay, yeah, okay, don't fucking do what I say. Do your own research then. What the hell? So,
Yeah.
anyway, um, so all of this stuff, blotching on my feet, unsightly, a lot of mucus, it's probably dairy. Um, but I went to see a doctor on the Isle of Wight called Dr. Mike Lambert, and he had a PhD in the medical sciences, but he just practiced all alternative stuff, which is really interesting. And he said he got invited to medical conferences in Europe. And once there was a pharma rep saying that herbal medicine is nonsense. And he stood up and he was like, well, then how come all of these drugs that your company makes use extracts from herbs? Which is really funny. And it's like a lot of people don't like me there, but some people really, really, some of the doctors really, really like me being there. They love it. So anyway, he went, that will all be your digestion. And he gave me some probiotics, prebiotics, some digestive aids, a bunch of stuff. And he also had some like really cool machines, like he hooked me up to and put me through, and then he swabbed my skin, and there's all this yellow stuff that had come out my skin. He's like, see, that's all coming out your liver. It was like really weird. I wonder what that machine was. Anyway, that confirmed that doctors know nothing because I took this stuff and yeah, everything improved. Moods, like no, the mucus, the blotching on my chest. So it put me on the right track. In hindsight, I see that he was still it was still to a degree just an offshoot of the allopathic model but he was helping, but it was like not the holistic view that we now take. But given this was quite a long time ago, maybe up to 15 years ago. So that started me off. I read the book The Medical Mafia by Langtot. Um, that was quite good. And yeah, I mean, I just heard some stuff about vaccinations. I just had a general sense all the way back then when I was like 20, 22 or so of this. And it's something that I picked up and put back down. I could have made a lot better choices a lot sooner. I wish I'd known about the power of fasting back then, because that's really what I needed, to be honest. I'd so overburdened my system by eating foods I was allergic to and eating foods that my body um, didn't tolerate well, that the best thing I possibly could have done was like regular fasting in my early 20s. It would have fixed almost everything. And it's continuing to fix me now. So
Are you still dairy free, gluten free?
I can actually tolerate wheat and dairy now, as long as I don't overdo it.
Mm.
So, but yeah, like, in Mexico, I'll occasionally have something with dairy in it, the cheese or whatever, because they serve the food with that. But and I was surprised because I don't order it, but if they bring it, it's really hard to resist. Once I just had a glass of wine on a date, and they brought crispy bread, and it was so good. I knew the next day that it wasn't that it wasn't a good decision. Fast forward a couple of months, I was at breakfast not that long ago before this fast, and without my requesting, they brought some bread with it, and I ate it, and I didn't notice any drop off. I didn't notice any ill effects at all. So I try and avoid it, but maybe every now and then is luxury.
So, in addition to adjusting your diet and then also addressing gut health through prebiotics and probiotics, were there
Yeah,
any other steps that yeah, were there any other steps that you've taken to address what you suspect was a vaccine injury, like specific
I've
detoxes that you've
tried.
done?
Well, I kind of take the holistic view. So when I take something, it's not to address the vaccine injury as
Okay.
such, or it's like to improve the terrain as a whole. Hyperbaric chamber is awesome. I think it's probably prohibitively expensive in the USA. But if you're ever in Central America or South America, definitely go. Like the best thing to do would be like to. I know not everyone could do this, but it's like if you had 2 weeks and you did it 10 times in 2 weeks, you'd be like off the charts. It's so tangible, the benefits of it, and it's not expensive here. Um, let's see. You can have broken cell wall chlorella every day. It's got lots of beneficial ingredients in it, and it binds to heavy metals. You need to take quite a healthy dose, to get those effects. Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, I don't know if it's true or not. I can only report what I've heard said he wasn't sure about people taking it in low doses because it might just mobilize the toxins and then they'll go and run somewhere else. So it's good to take quite a bit of it if you're going to take it, so it really bonds with them and takes them out. Um, I don't know. I've tried tons of stuff. I mean, I spent 6 months on yoga retreats, so or more than that actually. Um, so trying to get in shape, but like I was, it was all like I'm too anxious, I'm too depressed, I'm too slow, I'm too low in energy. This is the yoga stuff started way before I knew about all this terrain stuff. You know, I was leaving no stone unturned. I did like something like biofeedback. It's called
Hmm.
Brain State Technologies is the company. I did quite a lot of that, and that helped moderately, but not enough that I'd recommend it for the price. Like if I was a zillionaire, I'd probably keep on doing it. That was a long time ago. I was just searching for answers, but I didn't really find them until I found fasting, I think. I think fasting is the most effective thing I've ever done. Like, I'm so glad that I put myself to the challenge of like doing all that yoga, even though my body isn't fit for it and I wasn't in good shape when I started. And I learned so much about myself, but I I could have benefited from knowing about fasting sooner, I think.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we so thoroughly enjoy having conversations with folks like you who are doing the fasting, folks like Dr. Grayson Dart who've done them and who advocate for them, so that we could get this message out to some of the younger audience members so that they can introduce
Yeah.
it earlier in their life.
It's
And it's
interesting that you
free.
bring that up. Sorry to interrupt, but
Not
while
at
we're
all.
talking about it, so an old friend from childhood just posted on social media that their child, who's maybe 6 or 7, is going through cancer recovery. I think it was maybe even a brain
Wow, that's
tumor,
so sad.
and and my brother actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, so and so's going through this," and because my brother knows we're having conversations like this every week, do you have anything you want to recommend to this family? And the terrain, when you're so deeply immersed in the train camp, it's easy to forget that not everybody, far from it, is
Mm.
cognizant of this other paradigm of essentially toxins being the main culprit in all illness,
Yeah.
and detoxing, all sickness being detoxing. But of all the different arrows in my quiver that I could have reached for, if I chose to reach out at all, which I ultimately I did, water fasting seemed like the obvious choice, because it's,
Mm.
while it may come as a surprise to people who have never heard of any of these holistic modalities, it it just seemed. So what I sent was an interview with Lorne Lockman about
Mhm.
Tanglewood, that Alex Zeck did, and an interview with Veda Austin and all of her incredible research on water. And it seemed like an inspiring and not insulting or invasive modality to
Mhm.
recommend to somebody who's completely potentially new to the holistic health
Mhm.
world. And I haven't heard back yet, but um,
Mhm.
it is a really powerful modality and very simple. And if you can, if the person can afford to go to Costa Rica and have someone like Lorne sort of walk them through this process, as it sounds like you have experienced, seems like a really great way to start, especially um, for a child, maybe.
Right. Well, I mean, I couldn't advise because I don't have the expertise or the experience. I mean, you'd be better asking Dr. Cowan, to be honest, if you have a personal relationship with him. Um, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start. I guess you could um put the child on a 36-hour water fast, after dinner, 2 sleeps, and give them breakfast and see how they respond. But what would you learn? How would you know what was going on with the cancer process after that? You don't have a form of X-ray vision to see what's going on in the body. So I don't really have the expertise to comment on that. I would just say it's a really sad story. And imagine people getting cancer at 7. What have we done? What have we done with this planet that would um, lead to those sort of outcomes? It's really shocking.
That's an excellent point. And it's hard to know. Earlier in the conversation, you said, you had a desire to reduce unnecessary suffering.
Mm.
And I think the irony is that that's exactly what the quote unquote vax camp thinks they're doing. That's what vaccines do, is this the story that we've been sold for decades. These reduce unnecessary suffering. And of course, in this paradigm where everything is inverted, we're realizing it's quite the opposite. But I think that's
Mm.
why it's so hard to not only broach the subject, but to have the conversation, because both sides think that they're reducing unnecessary suffering.
Right.
And all we can do. I think I like your approach of become as healthy and strong and sharp and vibrant as you can, because ultimately, like anything else, seeing is believing. And it's sort of a slower process because it doesn't happen overnight for any of us, but it does happen. And so the
It
more of
does.
us that can walk in our truth and walk in our power and walk in our health. I mean, I just had the realization yesterday, because they say, let thy food be thy medicine, right?
Mhm.
And I realized, and that doesn't happen overnight either. And I've gone through phases where I'm following this protocol or buying zinc tablets or vitamin C or whatever it is. But then I realized that like more and more of my pantry and my refrigerator is just like jars of sea moss blends or
Mhm.
bone broth that I made or
Mhm.
egg salad with homemade mayonnaise. It's like it's just becoming more and more wholesome and
Mhm.
local the longer that I do it. And it's less reliant on any sort of supplementation that comes in a plastic bottle. And it's just part of my regular diet now. But it didn't happen overnight. This is like a 3-year process.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it is a process because I most people know what they should, at least some of what they should do, like get more exercise and eat better. But it's the psychological element, you know, the attachments to unhealthy habits. Like, and if you can make a step in the right direction, that's beneficial. Like, one, you can't be too doctrinaire. If you're like, I should be perfect, then you're setting yourself up to fail. A ship takes a long time to turn. So
Right.
we need to be It's like almost a new age cliche, but you need to be self-compassionate. And sometimes it's good to make a plan for the next few days. If you want to take a detox and say, well, I'm going to only eat fruit for a week, to get all that high water content food through it's important because when you drink water, it's absorbed as soon as it hits the walls of the intestines. Whereas when you eat fruit, it goes all the way through the tube. So you're getting such a deeper level of hydration from eating a watermelon or a papaya than you get from just drinking water. Don't, if you've got a difficulty with making decisions or sticking with it, well, I'll end up, here in Mexico eating chilaquiles, which is just basically corn chips with salsa over them for breakfast. Just decide in advance. I'm going to break my fast with watermelon. No, I'm going to have watermelon for breakfast. And then you don't need to think, should I have this? Should I have that? There's all sorts of tools you can use. But it is a process. I had the wisdom to make lots of better decisions. I had the knowledge to make lots of better decisions sooner than I made them. But I didn't have the wisdom. I wasn't ready to make such radical shifts. And a lot of what I do is natural to me now. It's not, it's just part of who I am. It's important to give yourself credit for how far you've come, I think. Because if you don't give yourself credit, then you're not sending the message to your unconscious mind that this is a good thing and I want more of it, right? If nothing's ever good enough, why would you ever do anything positive? Or if what you've done isn't good enough, then how's what you're going to do going to be good enough, It's always just now, just make one better decision. That's enough. And then make another one after that.
Yeah, the power of affirmations. Anthony,
Hmm.
speaking of making good decisions and healthy habits, I want to ask you the question we ask of all our guests, and that is, what are your non-negotiables those healthy habits that you do every day to tend to your terrain?
Eat some high water content food. Do some stretching. Slow down your breathing regularly during the day. Breathe slow and deep and don't rush the out breath. That's 3
Beautiful.
things.
Beautiful. And Antony, where can the listener learn more about you and your journey?
All right. Get the book at 7pharmamyths.com. There is an option, you can get it for free. If you want, you can give a contribution, which would be really appreciated because pharma reps are getting paid 6 figures and I'm not. And when I'm writing, I'm not working. And I've worked a lot less hours while I'm writing this. I'm freaking living in Mexico, it's nice and cheap here. Partly it facilitates me in being able to work less so I can work on the book more. And speaking of work, if you like my outlook, my personality, if you think I'd be a good counselor or therapist for you, you can contact me through social media, or you can go to beyourselfandloveit.com, beyourselfandloveit.com. And I guess if you let me know the terrain guys sent you, I'll do a free consultation to see if our personalities, if you think, usually if I want to work with someone, they want to work with me. And if I'm not feeling it, they're not feeling it. So it's more like just to, and those conversations are usually really useful, even when we don't continue. So those, I've got tons of links, but I think it's better not to give more than 2. If you want to find out more about me, you no doubt will. You'll check me out. You'll type my name into iTunes or whatever you use, So those 2 links, 7pharmamyths.com and beyourselfandloveit.com.
Beautiful. And we'll put those links in the description. Antony Sammeroff, thank you so much for joining us on the Terrain Theory podcast.
Thank you so much. I had such a great time with you guys. It was awesome. Yeah, really fun show.
Thank you. Look forward to meeting you in person one day.
In the Pioneer Room, in the Pioneer Room, in the Pioneer Room. It's the after party in the Pioneer Room. We welcome you in the Pioneer Room. It's the after party in the Pioneer Room, in the Pioneer Room, in the Pioneer Room.
Welcome everybody to the after party in the Pineal Room. I'm Ben Hardy, and I'm joined by Michael Joseph Merenda Jr.
Hi, Ben. I reached out to Dr. Covell a couple days ago. I wanted to get some of his sea moss as a Valentine's gift for Ruthie. And I wrote to him and he said, I am in the pineal room right now. This is no problem. It made me so happy.
We need to take a trip to the actual physical pineal room.
Yeah, that would be great. I think it's wherever you are, frankly, but I think it might be in Queens, New York.
In Queens, New York. Yeah. The conversation around sovereignty, I appreciated his perspective. I was anticipating an answer that looked more like forming a mob with pitchforks and going up against the system and advocacy and activism.
Right.
And it really wasn't. And it makes so much sense. It's one of those common sense answers when you think about it. But of course, like, start with yourself, be the change you want to see in the world. And in this case, it was be the manifestation of, the potential that you have as a human being. Like, realize that potential that you have as a human being in all aspects, physical, spiritual, emotional. And that's where you start. That's how you reclaim sovereignty.
Yeah, that is empowering. I think the tension always arises, and all of this is sort of intellectual, and it's hard to see how it plays out when the rubber meets the road. But like, it often comes up when someone's playing devil's advocate. It's like, you can be as sovereign as you want, but that when they come knocking on your door to whatever it is, take your guns away or take your children away because they're not, jabbed, or all these sort of like worst case scenarios. Like how far does quote unquote sovereignty get you when you're sort of up against the wall like that? I don't know the answer, or when you decide to extricate from the system and you're not going to pay taxes anymore and you're going to be a quote sovereign, like on paper, people seem to be doing it, but what are the disentanglements and the ramifications of moving from, sovereignty in mind, sovereignty in body via health and attitude, but actually like sovereignty by law? And that's something I thought we were going to talk about, but I, like you said, I sort of liked his attitude. It's like, well, I'm walking this righteous path, more philosophically sovereign.
Yeah. I would even backtrack and say,
one thing that came up in this conversation when you asked him about quack and that it's a derivation of the word quicksilver, mercury poisoning. And I think I'd come across that before, and that was a nice reminder. And it's sort of, with all the different threads that we're pulling on, I had like an aha moment when I realized, first of all, what even is history and who wrote it and what is real, but like this whole idea of vilifying a substance, in this case mercury, demonizing it as a poison that should be stricken from the culture. But was that just a psyop? Because it seems like mercury was instrumental in some of these potential ether energy structures, much like the prohibition of alcohol was sold to us as, well, people are drunk and abusing this concoction, but it was really a way to remove it as a competitor to fossil fuels, because people were also making like ethanol, and engines were being run on it, and it was just like sort of a competitive sleight of hand. And it's just like really interesting to put things in a broader context and see all the different ways that industry manipulates and alters narratives to suit their needs.
Yeah, and I think wrapped up in that, his phrase about quackery, and who says quackery, and you think about big pharma and history. It made me think history being written by the victors, but also the present being formed by those victors.
Yeah,
it's not over. It's not just looking back and that being changed, but the very day to day is unfolding. And so much of it is controlled and unfolding the way that those victors want it to.
Well, and in the digital realm, it's like, oh my God. Like, I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but there was an ad advertising. God, we could spend an hour just talking about all that. But there was an ad for like the new Google phone camera, and how you could just like circle something in the photo and it would just like Photoshop it out, like just with the touch of a finger. And, Ruthie and I are looking at each other like, OMG. It's just like, it's rewriting history in real time, normalizing it. My son Willie's like, what? That's pretty cool. And we're like, it's so fucked up. It's like no one will ever know what is real ever again. If we do, you can make that claim that we haven't known what's real for a long time, but now they're just showing it to you.
Yeah.
In 2023, look, you can change the present immediately.
Okay, so we've had one more guest on now who's done a water fast. He's ending a water fast. He's done many of them,
and we didn't know that getting into this conversation.
How much closer are you to pulling the trigger on a water fast, Michael? Like a long water fast?
Yeah, definitely closer.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, like I said, I did my baby one. I did a couple days in December, and it was actually impactful. So it's just a matter of like working out the logistics for me.
So you're obviously not going to do it when you're on tour.
No, but I mean, that was interesting. I remember I laid up on my water fast because we had a podcast and because I had some gardening manual labor to do that time. And he's like, day 13, setting up podcast interviews. It's just moving on with his life, not overthinking it in some sense.
This is what I'm taking from the conversation with Antony, that with sovereignty, you start with yourself. You find your sense of purpose in life and you do it. You make your life amazing and spread the love. And you learn things that are useful and you teach them to other people who want to learn them. I think that's so powerful.
That was a beautiful synopsis, Ben. I like that. And sometimes, again, we can overthink these things. Like, I have to learn how to put horseshoes on a horse, or like all these old world crafts, or whether it's like carpentry or mechanics. But he's like, go to a salsa class. It's like, I loved that. Put yourself back in the world, relating to a person, like doing something with your body is just as valuable. And that was a beautiful reminder.
That is a beautiful reminder. The advice I saw was go live with the Amish, because they're going to be the ones that make it out of this.
Somebody shared that recently. Maybe it was Chris Alvarez. Like the answer we've been looking for has been right under our nose all this time. Yeah. Well, folks, nothing you heard here should be taken as medical advice, as neither Mike nor I are medical experts. And remember that you are light, you are love, and you are your primary healthcare provider. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one.